What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. This is the channel where we sit down and cover different comic book stories from different comic book companies. Today we're going to jump back over to Marvel Comics and continue our X-Men reading order. Matter of fact, we pick up with Uncanny X-Men number 158 and 159. Now these two issues are very important because you do have the X-Men fighting against Rogue one more time, but also Storm does get bitten by Dracula, which is a very important issue. So, with that being said, I do hope you enjoy today's comic book video, and if you do, hit that like button down below and subscribe. But here we go. Now, in the opening of Uncanny X-Men number 158, we actually pick up with Carol Danvers training with the Starjammers. Now, if you are wondering why in the world Carol Danvers is here right now fighting against the Starjammers, well, remember, Carol Danvers had to recently come over to the X-Men to get Charles Xavier's help because back in Avengers Annual number 10, Carol Danvers, which was back then known as Miss Marvel, fought against Rogue. Now we all know back at this point in Marvel Comics, Rogue was an X-Men villain. But with Rogue's powers, Rogue is able to take other people's powers. And so back in their fight, Rogue did hold on too long to Carol Danvers, took her powers and her memories. And so she had to come to Charles Xavier to kind of get some help to get her memories back. But at this point right here, we are beginning to see that her powers are coming back to her, which is a great thing to see. Now, if you are also wondering why in the world the Starjammers are here as well, again, let me explain. In our previous video, the Starjammers had to team up with the X-Men to help the Shi'ar Empire find Illyandra, because the Shi'ar Empire did say they will blow up Earth to get their queen back because the last trace of evidence told them that Illyandra was on Earth. It was a whole mess. Go watch our last video. But we're seeing these two guys, or two sides, Carol Danvers and Starjammers, kind of training together. But then we jump over to Kitty Pryde to get a reminder that at this point in Marvel Comics, really, in most Marvel Comics, Kitty Pryde was madly in love with Colossus. But here's the thing, back at this point, the two of them would kind of flirt with one another, but neither of them would make a move to say, hey, I actually want to pursue a relationship with you. And so in our last video, Kitty Pryde actually kissed Colossus. And so Kitty Pryde is wondering, how should she confront Colossus so they can have a conversation about their feelings? Honestly, I'm kind of like, dude, just go talk to the man. We also have to get reminded about Charles Xavier, because remember, in our last video, Charles Xavier tried to make a connection with the minds of Nightcrawler and Kitty Pryde through space. But something happened to him that kind of shut his mind down. And so the X-Men have no idea what's wrong with him. He's able to breathe normally, but he's not moving. His mind is shut down. And the question is, what had happened to him? And so what Illyandra, the woman that's madly in love with Charles Xavier, what she did was she brought one of her people over from the Shi'ar Empire, which is Oracle. Oracle being another psychic that is able to kind of access the mind of Charles Xavier, hoping that she'd be able to learn what is going on with him. But instantly, as soon as she tries to read the mind of Charles Xavier, she gets an incredible feedback that just makes everything harder on her, to the point that Storm had to throw Wolverine in between her and Charles Xavier as a way to break the connection, because if Oracle had tried to stay even longer connected to the mind of Charles Xavier, a lot of bad things could have happened. And so it's Oracle saying whatever is wrong with Charles Xavier, she was unable to actually help the man. But then you have Kitty Pryde come by to tell the rest of the X-Men that they are being talked about on live television. And this is very important because this is a moment where you have Chris Claremont remind us that the human race actually hates mutants a lot. But we pick up with the reporter actually interviewing Robert Kelly. Now, Robert Kelly, that name should sound very familiar because he has been seen in a lot of our videos when it comes to the X-Men reading order, especially in Days of Future Past. Because remember, in that storyline right there, a future version of Kitty Pryde came back in time to hopefully change the timeline. Because in her timeline, the new version of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants led by Mystique actually killed Robert Kelly, and with his death, it led the human race restart the Sentinel program, and it led to mutants being almost wiped out. At the same time, humans as well. And so Kitty Pryde came back in time to change that future. Now, of course, the X-Men did save him, and so you would think the X-Men would actually be appreciated by Robert Kelly. Instead, he's like, no, mutants are dangerous. Mutants can literally wipe us out. Mutants can be the end of everything on Earth. Which is kind of like, wait, the X-Men saved you, but you still hate them because they are mutants. And this is Chris Claremont saying, hey, mutants will always be hated on. But with that interviewing ending, you have Moira McTaggart get concerned because back when the X-Men originally started, Charles Xavier was working with the government, and he gave the government a lot of files about the different X-Men members, even the new X-Men team we have right now. And so you have Moira telling the X-Men team that, listen, you guys might need to break in there to get rid of those files because those files could bring more trouble to the X-Men. And you have Kitty Pryde say that she can make us some kind of virus that will go on the computer and get rid of all their files. We do get another random page, but this page is very important because it reminds us that Cyclops found out in our last video that Corsair was his father, who he has met once before but did not know that this was his lost father. Except remember, Cyclops has a brother, Alex Summers, aka Havoc, and so Cyclops must take Corsair to see his other son that he had no idea that he was alive as well. And so you have Cyclops go by and say, hey Alex, guess what, man, I'm here to see you, but I found our long lost father. He is alive and he is right here. So of course we do jump over to the X-Men, and they're about to break into the Pentagon. Now this makes sense because it is the X-Men trying to break in here to go ahead and delete the files the government has on them thanks to Charles Xavier. But you do have Carol Danvers being the one to use her military clearance as a way to help the X-Men get inside. For you fans out there who don't know Carol Danvers' history, Carol Danvers was part of the military before she became Miss Marvel. And so with her coming here to the Pentagon and having some kind of military clearance, kind of makes sense. And you have Wolverine and Storm pretend to be other military people with higher clearance like Carol Danvers has as a way to get inside. So they're going in undercover. But here comes the big problem. They run into Rogue. Now with them running into Rogue, this is kind of a big thing because it's Carol Danvers realizing the one person who took her whole life away is here in front of her once again and could possibly do it all over again because Carol Danvers lost her memory and lost her powers. Now in the last couple books, she began to have her powers return to her, but not completely. And that goes the same for her memories as well. She has not been able to get everything she wanted back because of Rogue. But you do have the X-Men fight against Rogue because again, Rogue at this point in Marvel Comics is a super villain, while you have Carol Danvers try to sneak away and deal with the problem they have originally, which is to get rid of the files the government has on the X-Men. Now, of course, if Rogue is here, that means Mystique is here because remember guys, back in Avengers Annual number 10, when Rogue and Mystique tried to break out the rest of Mystique's version of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, they failed, and Mystique and Rogue had to leave. And so if Rogue is here, that means Mystique is here. And of course, Mystique is here as an undercover scientist or whatever here in the Pentagon. And so Mystique sees Carol Danvers and realizes, okay, If Carol Danvers is here, that means she must be helping the X-Men. But at the same time, she knows Rogue is fighting against the X-Men. And so it is Mystique telling herself that she needs to stop Carol Danvers. Go ahead and get rid of her. And so while the X-Men are fighting against Rogue, Carol Danvers does sneak into the main computer room to give that computer the virus it needs to get rid of those files. The problem is Mystique comes in and Mystique tries to pretend to be Nick Fury as a way to get close to Carol Danvers, then shoot her. But of course she only grazed her, and so Carol Danvers does get back up, and that does begin a battle between Mystique and Carol Danvers as well. And so you do have two fights going on at the same time. But at the end, you do have the X-Men being able to kind of defeat Rogue in a way, but Rogue does get away. But for Mystique, she is defeated by Carol Danvers, and Mystique is actually arrested by the military people in the Pentagon, which is huge. But also, you do have Carol Danvers being able to go ahead and give that computer that virus to go ahead and get rid of all the X-Men files that was on that computer. Also kind of deleting the file on her and her alter ego, Miss Marvel. Because remember guys, at this point in Marvel Comics, she was not known as Captain Marvel, she was known as Miss Marvel. But that ends Uncanny X-Men number 158. Then we jump over to Uncanny X-Men number 159. Now with this book right here, yes, it is the Dracula book, but at first, we don't jump right into Dracula. Instead, we actually pick up with the X-Men busting into the apartment of Misty Knight, and of course, scaring her new roommate, Harmony Young. Now, Harmony Young is actually a character who's just some crazy famous fashion person, and that is really it. She is the new roommate to Misty Knight, and so with the X-Men busting in there, they do scare her and wondering why in the world they're there for. And you have the X-Men tell her that Misty Knight said it is okay for them to stay there because Kitty Pryde is supposed to meet up with her family in a nearby area. And so that is why the X-Men kind of came by unannounced and busting right in to Misty Knight's apartment. And we have Cyclops taking Corsair to go see Havoc, because you have to remember Havoc is the brother to Cyclops, and the two of them thought their father was dead. Cyclops found out in our last video Corsair was alive, and so he brought Corsair here to show Havoc, hey, our dad is still alive. Now this section right here does end off on a cliffhanger where you have Cyclops and Havoc asking their father if they can go with him to space, and he's kind of like, I don't know about that. But then we jump over to Kitty Pryde calling the rest of the X-Men because she's calling them to tell them that she did make it safe to her parents' house, but also that to see if Storm made it back to Misty Knight's apartment safely. Of course, you have Wolverine say no, and now wondering where in the world is Storm. And we do see Storm laying in the middle of an alleyway, and it seems like something has happened to her. Now, of course, someone was able to find Storm. They called police, and the police took her to a nearby hospital. And you have the doctor tell us that there are some kind of wounds to her throat. Now, we already know it was Dracula. I told you this book was about who? Dracula. But you do have the doctor actually call up the X-Men, and so you had Colossus and Wolverine run over there to see if their friend is okay. Now, you do have the doctor actually telling the X-Men that Storm should stay here to make sure that she gets better. But when they all walk into her room, they find out that she's okay, and she tells them that she wants to go home. Now, the doctor says, I advise you to stay here, but once again, Storm says no, and the doctor lets her go home. But once they bring her back home, this begins the process of us seeing the effects of Dracula biting Storm. What I mean by that is she's unable to sleep. And with that happening, she's becoming more tired at night, actually throughout the whole day. And there is a moment where you do have Kitty Pryde actually come back to the home of Misty Knight, and the first thing she does is to go check up on Storm. And once she does that, she tries to open up the blinds to let some sunlight in, and the sunlight affects Storm in a way where it bothers her, telling us that yes, the vampire bite by Dracula is beginning to change her body, and the only thing she wants right now is for everyone to leave her alone. Which, matter of fact, makes Kitty Pryde cry because the way Storm told her to leave her alone. But you have Kitty Pryde leaving to go investigate where Storm was attacked. But later that night, you do have Dracula stop by, of course, to get the woman he just turned into a vampire, to make her become his new princess, princess, queen, whatever. Anyways, he came to get here to make Storm fall in love with him. But you do have Kitty Pryde barge in there with the Holy Cross, because of course, back in the old days, one of the main weaknesses when it comes to vampires was the Holy Cross. The problem is you have Dracula realize that Kitty Pryde doesn't actually believe in Christianity. Oh my gosh, I cannot talk right now. But because she does not believe in God, of course the cross does not work on Dracula. So he was able to send her away, grab Storm, and leave. Now you do have the rest of the X-Men pop in there because they heard all the commotion going on. And you have Kitty Pryde tell Wolverine, hey man, listen, Dracula is real. Dracula came here. He just took Storm. We gotta go. And of course you have the X-Men leave. Now this is the moment where you actually have the X-Men go to Dracula's castle and they begin to battle against Dracula. To make the fight very interesting, we get to see that Dracula is on a totally different level when it comes to the X-Men, because you have Colossus, super strength, metal skin, Nightcrawler, can teleport, Kitty Pryde can phase through walls, Wolverine, the claws, and also a healing factor. But at this point right here, they do not stand a chance against Dracula. This man is just playing with all of the X-Men minus Kitty Pryde, because you actually have Kitty Pryde sneak into the castle thinking that maybe she can find a way to save Storm. And when she does find Storm, of course Storm has already changed into a vampire. Her eyes are red. She got the fangs growing. It's beginning to look bad for the X-Men. But Kitty Pryde can't go through the idea of killing someone that she looks as a mother. But then we get back to Dracula whooping the X-Men butt all over the place. Literally, it's not even a challenge for him. But you do have Storm reappear. Now for Dracula, he thinks that Storm is on his side. And so matter of fact, he's down to killing the X-Men so that he can get back to Storm becoming the queen he always wanted. But that is when we come to find out that Storm is actually resisting the powers of Dracula, which is something huge to say, because honestly, there's not really any dialogue here to say why she does. It's just a strength of her mind and her body as a way to resist the powers of Dracula. And so she does begin to fight against him. Now, he does try one more time to see if he still has a hold on her, but of course, it doesn't work. And so with that being said, you have Dracula say, you know what? Fine, I'll leave. You win this time. But I will come back for you because I realize you're a strong woman that I want to be with. And I'm gonna let you live this time. But sooner or later, you will join me and become my queen. And so he leaves. And you do have Storm and the rest of the X-Men go back to Misty Knight's apartment where they celebrate the idea of actually defeating Dracula, which is huge for them. But this is the moment that kind of tells us the Brood Saga is back on, because you do have Moira McTaggart call the X-Men up to tell them to come back. Charles Xavier is actually getting worse, which means we're right back in the Brood Saga. Unfortunately, the next video will not be the Brood Saga. We need to do a 4-part miniseries called Storm and Illyandra Magic, because that miniseries actually comes right in the middle of the next Uncanny X-Men book, which is Uncanny X-Men number 160. But between that book right there, a whole 4-part miniseries happened to explain the origin of Magic, a fan favorite X-Men character. But with that being said, this is the moment I am going to end this video. So hit that like button down below and subscribe. But I do hope you enjoyed today's comic book video. Later, y'all.